Hi, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for our internship panel. My name is Aaliyah Quintel, and I'm a senior here at UMass and a second-year peer advisor in the communication department. In today's event, you'll hear from 4 dynamic communication students to learn more about the endless possibilities of a career and internship options you can pursue with a degree in communication. Today's event will run as follows. I will introduce the panelists, giving them a few minutes to introduce themselves, and then we will jump into our Q&A session, where you will hear from each panelist. At the end of this pre-submitted questions section, there will be time for live questions followed by closing remarks from our panelists. At any point in the event, I encourage you all to use the chat function to ask any questions that come to mind. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists. So first, we have Rebecca Duffy, a senior journalism and communication double major. Rebecca will be speaking about her experience as a communications and marketing intern at UMass Admissions and as a production intern at GWBY. Anything you would like to add, Rebecca?
No, I think that sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about my internship experiences.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next, we have Lizette Santamaria, a junior communication and journalism double major. Lizette will be speaking about her experience as a communication and marketing intern at UMass Admissions. Anything you would like to add, Lizette?
Actually, yes. So for the past few weeks, I've been working as a blogger for UMass Admissions, but just today, actually, I got put on the social media committee to start working on more social media posts. So that's definitely exciting and something I look forward to. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Congratulations, Lizette. And next, we have Marianne Molinex, and she is a senior communication and IT minor. Marianne will be speaking about her experience as a customer success enablement co-op at Salesify. Anything that you would like to add, Marianne?
No, that all sounds good. Happy to be here and can't wait to see what people want to know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And lastly, probably an awkward transition, we have myself. So hi, my name is Aaliyah, and I'm a senior English and communication double major, and I will be speaking about my internship at General Motors on their internal communications team. So I worked there this summer. I was a remote intern, really fun experience, and I'm really excited to be both moderating and being on the panel today. So now that we have the introductions out of the way, it's time to get into the Q&A session. So kind of how the questions are divided, it's kind of in general categories, so all the way from prep and search to the end of securing the internship. So hopefully this is a wide enough range of questions for everyone. And like I said previously, one of the benefits about Zoom is that you can ask questions whenever you feel like it. So please feel free to use the chat function at any time. So now let's get into the questions. So our first category is preparation and search, and we will be starting with Rebecca. So our first question, and we'll go down the line of panelists, is why did you want to have an internship?
Yeah, so I wanted to have an internship in college because I wanted to gain a valuable experience in the fields that I'm interested in. So even though my focus at UMass is broadcast journalism, I wanted internships that also applied to my communication double major. So I went out and I got the communication and marketing one at UMass Admissions, as well as my production one at WGBY, so I could kind of double dip and see what I'm really interested in for when I graduate at UMass.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Now moving on to Lizette.
So for me, over the summer, actually, I added journalism as my second major. I was a comm major primarily. And then with that journalism double major, I actually added public relations as a concentration. So my internship at UMass Admissions doing blogging and now social media is definitely aligned to the public relations aspect. And in high school and previously, I've worked as I've taken on social media type roles in clubs, and I've also done volunteer work in terms of social media, but this job feels a lot more legit and official, and it's definitely something that's going to give me a lot more credibility and help me build a writing and digital portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizette. Miriam?
Yeah, so when I first started looking for a co-op, it was mostly this kind of feeling of I have no idea what I want to do, and everything I was learning in classes, they're so interesting, but how does this apply to the real world? What does the application process of this would look like? So that was mostly what I set out for, and I always had an interest in tech, and I took a couple coding classes at UMass, so finding a tech company while still being able to like write and video edit was kind of that perfect balance.
Awesome. Thank you, Marianne. And especially for myself, kind of echoing what Marianne just said, for me, kind of the whole reason why I wanted to kind of secure an internship is, especially with the comm major, something that I've really learned, and I'm sure all of you can kind of agree, it's a really broad major and there's so much that you can kind of do with it. So one of the best ways to really figure out what you actually want to do with it for me was really trying internships. And I know for myself, I've been very fortunate to kind of work in a multitude of different industries. Like when I worked at General Motors, that was the first time I ever worked in automotive. I've worked in higher education, tech, and nonprofit as well. So I was able to really, for me, when I do internships, I really want to be able to see what I can kind of do with the job. And especially since this was an internship I took going into my senior year, I wanted to see what I could do as a full-time career as well. So for me, it was a really awesome experience. So now moving on to the next question. So this question is, where did you begin your search? For example, Handshake, LinkedIn, Indeed. And we will be starting with Lizette this time.
So for this, I actually was interested in UMass admissions like before even last year. So I actually reached out to you, Aaliyah, and another one of my friends, Jessie Harrington, who was already on the admissions team. So that's kind of where it all began. I asked if they were hiring again, and it turns out they were in August.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lizette. Miriam?
Yes, so my search really began like Google, LinkedIn, Handshake. I didn't have a specific company or position in mind. It was mostly whatever I could get my hands on. So it was just Googling co-op 2020 and seeing what came up.
Awesome. Rebecca?
Yeah, so my experiences were different for both of my internships. I always begin my search on LinkedIn, and I always make sure my profile is up to date. But I actually found the UMass admissions internship posted on like the UMass jobs page, and that's how I found it there. And then for my WGBY internship, I knew I wanted to work there, so I went on their website to see if they had a posting, and they did. They didn't have one on LinkedIn, but I went on their actual website, and I stayed in contact with somebody who worked there because they didn't think they had a position for me, and I didn't think I would be able to work there. And then months later, they ended up reaching back out to me saying that they had something for me.
It's awesome. And for myself, I personally have the most luck on LinkedIn. I found this position with General Motors on LinkedIn. What I probably like a little bit more about LinkedIn compared to Handshake is that I know for me, especially looking into full-time recruitment, what's great about LinkedIn is that you can put alerts on. So if you're looking for specific roles or if you want to be in a specific location, I know when I was looking for internships, I literally just put summer internship 2020 and worldwide and in the category that I was looking into, which was marketing communication. And it's just a really great resource. Like I said, I'm a little bit biased to LinkedIn because I think it's a little bit more approachable than some of the other websites, but highly recommend checking out LinkedIn. So moving on to our next question. So this question is, how did you hear about your specific internship? And we will start with Rebecca.
Yeah, so I realized I kind of already answered this, but for UMass admissions, I heard about it through the UMass job posting page, jobs and internships, and then WGBY on their website.
Awesome. Miriam?
Yeah, I found mine on LinkedIn and mostly just kind of saw the company name, saw the position, read through the job description. I was like, I can do that, so I applied.
Totally feel that. Lizette?
Like I said, I got mine, I found out about mine specifically through friends like Aaliyah and Jessie. But I think that just speaks to the importance of networking and just like asking around.
Absolutely. And I know from my own experience, definitely echoing Miriam, I kind of just looked everywhere and I found General Motors. I didn't really, obviously I knew what General Motors was, but I wasn't really looking to actively work there. It just kind of worked out. I saw the position. I was like, that looks great. And the rest is history. So moving on to our next question, which is, I'm sure, kind of a hot question. A lot of people, at least I know I get questions about all the time. So how did you perfect your resume and cover letter? Did you meet with someone for review? And we will start with Lizette.
Okay, I've been talking about you a lot, Aaliyah, but basically you did help me write my cover letter a bit by showing an example of the cover letter that you had for General Motors. But also I think like the biggest thing that you helped me with my application was even like encouraging me to apply, because when I saw the job posting on the student job board that Rebecca was talking about, I didn't feel as confident or qualified to take on the role. And then Aaliyah was like, it doesn't matter if you kind of don't fit all the descriptions right away. Like, you should still go for it. And she kept trying to encourage me. So yeah, that was it.
Well, I'm really happy it worked out for you, Lizette. Rebecca?
Yeah, so my boyfriend is in Eisenberg at UMass, and everyone in Eisenberg has to like have this standard of a resume and a cover letter. So he sat down and he helped me mirror that standard with my resume and cover letter, and that really helped me get the two positions that I had.
Awesome. Miriam?
So I'm pretty sure for mine, the application didn't have a field for a cover letter, so I didn't write one for that. But as far as my resume went, sending it to more of a close circle, so kind of people who are already in the professional world, if they're friends, or my family, my parents were definitely huge resources for reviewing.
Awesome. And similar to like what everyone else just said, for me, I kind of had like a generic kind of outline already. So I have a very basic throughout the years. So I've had help with friends and kind of mentors kind of label out a cover letter. For my General Motors position, I personally didn't need a cover letter, but I found it's always really good to have one because so many jobs nowadays ask for it. So it's always good to have one on the back burner and kind of a general outline. And then I know for my resume, I kind of, similar to what everyone else said, I kind of use my resources. I would definitely recommend, especially UMass has a really great career service center, especially SBS. So please utilize it. They're still open this semester, and it's a really great resource to get someone professionally to kind of look at it. I know I didn't use it, but I wish I did, and I wish I did sooner because it's a really great and awesome resource. So now moving into our next section, and this is all about interviews. So our first question is, what was the interview process like for you? And we will start with Miriam.
So my interview process was 2 remote calls, one with a recruiter and then one with the director of the team. Following that, if you made it through, you would go through an in-person, it was about 4 hours worth of interviewing. So it was first with the recruiter, then every single person who was on the team.
Awesome. Lizette?
Hold on, sorry. My dad's gonna come in any second, so the door's gonna open.
It's okay.
Okay, so with my interview process, it was just one remote call as opposed to 2 that Miriam was talking about. But I was also like pretty nervous for it. It was at it was the Friday of the first week of school, and I still was getting used to like getting up at a certain time. And I know I had it at 11:30 a.m. and I still was like, on summer mode. But overall, I think it went pretty well because I was able to share kind of my enthusiasm for UMass and my storytelling capabilities, because I talked about the ideas that I had for certain blog posts. And I think like the one thing that I think I really did well that I would probably recommend is I asked my interviewers, I had 2 of them, Matt Medeiros and Gretchen, and I asked them like, what would be their advice for someone who's like newly coming into the role. And I think that question really stuck with them. And actually they told me that I wasn't supposed to they would contact me like a week later to see if I got the job, but actually I got it that same day. I didn't even like have time to write a thank you letter yet at that point, and they had already contacted me. So I think that would be one thing I'd recommend.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizette. Rebecca?
Yeah, so my interview processes were different for UMass admissions. That happened over the phone with both of my bosses, as Lizette mentioned. And then for WGBY, that occurred in person. This was pre-pandemic. And 2 people interviewed me. It was one of the show's producers and then the general manager at WGBY. And that was about a 20-minute interview, same with UMass admissions. And then they contacted me about a week later about the positions.
And for myself with General Motors, it was actually a really interesting kind of process. So for me, after I applied online, I first did a HireVue. So if for those of you who don't know what a HireVue is, it's kind of like a pre-recorded video interview. So you get these kind of array of questions and you have the opportunity to kind of like record yourself. Normally, most companies don't let you do it multiple times, but what was awesome about General Motors is that they actually let me do it more than once. My personal approach with that is I usually one and done. I don't really like to do it multiple times because I find that I mess up the second time. But I thought it was really awesome that they actually let me watch it over and do it again. So after the HireVue process, I was pushed on to meeting the recruiter. So I had a very general phone screening with the recruiter. And then from there, what was really interesting is that General Motors does an assessment. So I was given like a case study. So one of the things that General Motors was really pushing, and there still are now, was their EVs. So they're hoping to become all electric by 2040. So I was given a case study as an example of things that I would do for work in my job. So I was given, with the current EV market, how would I implement and make EVs more accessible? I loved it. I thought it was super awesome. I think what was the really cool thing about doing a case study is that you're able to actually see, is this something I'm really interested in doing? This is kind of the example of the work I would do. And for them, it's also a really cool opportunity to actually see your work. I think a lot of the times what kind of sucks with interviews is that it's really a fit, and it's really seeing if they think you're a really good like personality fit for the role. And very few times, at least in certain internship interviews, do they really take the opportunity to actually see some of your work and see what you do. And I think that can make a huge difference. And it was awesome. And then I had my final round interview, which I had two of the management people. So how my role worked at General Motors is that I applied for a global communication role. And then towards the end, when I actually got the role, they actually placed me in a department. So I ended up interviewing with who would become my manager and someone else on the other team. And it was an awesome process. I think that they definitely do a little bit of a rigorous process over there, but it was awesome. It went by really fast. I applied. My first interview was in August. By November, I had the job. So it's a very robust process. And I think that just goes to show how different every interview can be and how important it is to kind of prep. So with that in mind, the next question is, how did you prepare for your interviews? And we will start with Rebecca.
I always prepare for my interviews with writing down some questions that I think the interviewees are going to ask me, as well as having somebody else interview me. And I always tell people, give me really hard questions, because you never know what they're going to give you in an interview. And the more prepared you are, with the questions, the more comfortable you're going to feel. So I always spend a lot of time focusing on what questions they're going to ask me and how I can wow them with my answer.
Awesome. Miriam?
Yeah, so my interview process, like the preparation, is pretty similar to Rebecca's, where I get someone else to interview me. Also just making kind of a list of experiences that I've had and figuring out this experience, where would it be applicable, for which type of questions would be best to answer with this. As well as doing a lot of research on the company and figuring out where do you align, where do you not align, and how can you address those.
Awesome. Lizette?
So for me, I went back over my resume and cover letter and like kind of looked over the details, especially that I wanted to bring out during the interview. And then I also was given an assignment before the interview even started, and that assignment was to create 5 story ideas not off the top of my head, but to write them down. And so I wanted to make sure I went back over those and kind of knew what I was going to say if I needed to share those stories, which I did end up having to share those stories.
Awesome. And for myself, kind of similar to what everyone else just said, I can't recommend enough to really prep for any interview you do, whether it be researching the role and making sure you know the company. Something that I personally like to do, and I think this really just helps me focus and make sure I know everything, is that I not only print out kind of the job posting before I do the interview, but also I kind of handwrite it over again just to make sure that I really know what I'm talking about. And specifically, if you're able to, when you get to the point where you talk to HR or any hiring manager, if you know who you're talking to, I cannot recommend enough to actually look them up and find information on them. You don't have to be creepy, but you can definitely look them up on LinkedIn and just see how long they've been in the company, potentially what role they're currently in, and just to kind of get a really good feel for them. And that way you know to ask like certain questions, like what's your favorite part of working at this company, like kind of how long you've been there. And it always helps to know, have things in the back of your mind that you already know about the person. So I cannot recommend enough to do your research. And a lot of the times it really shows. And especially like at the time I didn't know what specifically I was working on, but I know in the past I was in a marketing communication role where I worked on a blog. So if you know that you're working on specific things like that, look into it. Talk about that stuff when you're in the interview, because it kind of shows that you're really determined. And it also shows that you did your research, which can go a really long way in the process of you landing the internship or job. So now moving on to our next category, which is probably everyone's favorite, money. So the first question we have is, was your internship paid or unpaid? And we will start with Mariam.
So my co-op was paid. Do I say how much?
I mean, you don't have to say how much. You can just kind of specify.
I mean, like, it was 18, so nothing too extreme, but for a full-time, like 40-hour week, considering this was like my first internship or co-op in college, I was pretty happy with that.
Awesome. Lizette?
Mine was also paid.
Awesome. Rebecca?
Mine were both paid.
Mine was also paid. And I will say what was, I guess, somewhat interesting about mine is that this was the first time I actually was in a salary position. So I wasn't an hourly employee. I got paid salary, which was definitely a different ballpark. I will say that being an hourly employee and being a salary employee come with their various perks. It was kind of awesome to like be able to end work early on certain days and know that I was still coming home with the same amount of money, and still getting, General Motors does a shutdown during the summer where they kind of like revamp all their plants and everyone gets the week off. And it was nice to still get paid for the week off and not have to worry about that. So it's definitely, I feel like most internships tend to be hourly, but it's definitely something to look into. Some will do salary, and they both come with their perks, which is really awesome. So now moving on to our next question, and this might be a little bit wonky if some of us did remote internships, but I still thought it was applicable to ask. Did you do any budgeting for your internship? If yes, were you able to adhere to your budget, or did you spend a different amount of money than anticipated? And we will start with Rebecca.
So no, I did not do any budgeting for my internships. However, I did work at WGBY while I was living on campus. That's about a 40-minute drive back and forth, and I did that twice a week. So I burned through my gas.
Miriam.
Salsify's in the city, so definitely going in, I had to budget what I wanted to spend on and all that. And I had to like find a place to live as well. So figuring out how to balance everything was crucial.
Lizette?
I'm doing a remote internship right now, so I didn't really have to budget, but I suppose if you were going to, I would think about transportation like Rebecca was saying.
Yeah, same for me. I ended up working, even though General Motors is located in Detroit, I ended up doing my internship virtually from the room I'm currently sitting in. But I know that kind of if I were to kind of be there, I cannot stress enough, especially if you have to relocate like I would have had. Definitely do your budgeting. It's very quick. You might look at paper and be like, wow, I'm making all this money. This is awesome. And it can go by really quick. And especially like when you're in different locations, like when I did one of my internships in person for the summer, it's very easy to start making friends and start wanting to go grab dinner and do all this other stuff. And it can add up very quickly. And obviously the experience is awesome, but I know for me personally, like I use my summer experience to really help pay for my semesters. So it's definitely, if you can budget, really important to try to. And even if you're remote like I was, still good to remember to kind of save a little bit of money and be a little bit mindful of the things that you are making. So moving on to our next category, and this is probably a little bit wonky for some of us who are also remote as well, but I still thought it would be a good question to ask. So this next category is about housing. So our first question is, what was your housing situation like? So did you live on campus? Did you live at home? And how did you kind of navigate that experience while working? So we'll start with Rebecca.
Yeah, so my housing was pretty much just on-campus housing. For WGBY, I did that first semester and I was on campus. For UMass admissions, however, I started that when I was on campus, and then obviously like we got sent home due to COVID and everything like that. So it became like remote, like I lived at home and I did the work remotely.
Awesome. Lizette?
I live at home right now.
And then Miriam.
So I started out living at the Mount Ida campus. And then when COVID hit, I didn't anticipate being remote for as long as I have been. So I did move to Cambridge, got a place there.
Awesome. And like I said previously, my job was fully remote. So I worked from home, so I didn't really have to worry about kind of relocating. But I will say with General Motors, and this is something I highly suggest kind of looking into when you're considering an internship, General Motors actually would have paid for my housing if I went, since I was relocating. So they have like deals with some of the apartment complexes nearby. So it would have been absolutely free for myself to kind of live there. And especially when you're moving to a city like Detroit or even Boston or any like major city in the US, it's awesome to kind of be able to get paid for relocation. They also would have paid for my travel expenses. So usually they don't really say this in the description a lot of the times, but I mean, if you're really interested in positions that do this, a lot of companies, to get good talent, or if they're really trying to attract people, will do incentives like that. I know a lot of big tech companies do it as well, especially when they're trying to recruit people from all over the country. So even though I unfortunately did not get to utilize their really awesome housing, they do provide free housing, which is a huge perk, especially when you had to relocate like I would have had to. So now getting into the fun stuff, and this is about the actual internship experience. So our first question is, what was a typical day at your internship like? What kinds of work did you do? And we will be starting with Marianne.
So I don't think I have a typical day at my internship. It's truly a mix of writing or video editing, coding as well, depending on what's happening in the company at that time. We have these events or these times called feature release, and they're usually at the beginning of the month, and that's when we work on getting all these training materials out for a new feature. Other times it's working on courses. Yeah, there's really no typical day for us.
Lizette.
I also don't think that I have a very typical like routine kind of day for my internship, but I will say that I do just like track my hours throughout the week, and when I'm writing blog posts, usually those are supposed to take around 2 hours, so I'll do those. But every 2 weeks, I will meet with my supervisor to talk about blog ideas that I have.
Awesome. Rebecca.
Yeah, so basically the same as Lizette for my UMass admissions internship. No day looks the same, really, except I focus more on video editing. So my boss will give me some videos to edit whenever I have time during the week. And then every other week, I have a meeting with her. And then for WGBY, it was more structured. I would go in anytime I was working, and we would either have 2 or 3 show recordings each day, and I would operate cameras, teleprompters, basically wherever they needed me to fill in. So that was always kind of the same for me.
Awesome. And kind of echoing pretty much what everyone else said, my days were pretty really different every day. One of the biggest projects that I kind of worked on in General Motors is that I was on their internal communication team. So one of the websites that they use, it's kind of like an internal blog / like Facebook page. We called it Socrates. So we kind of work on the news stories each day. So I'd be getting stories anywhere from kind of like things that were going on with the brand. So I worked really primarily with Chevy, kind of things that were going on at the time, and also kind of like hard hitting news stories that the CEO, what was kind of going on with the CEO, all the way to like really cool like employee relations stories and just kind of everything that was going on in the company. So that consumed a lot of my day, kind of writing these stories. There'd be certain days when we get crazy hard hitting news that was kind of pushed my way and be like, please, you need to please tell the story right away. And it was really awesome. But I think especially a lot of my time was kind of divided between multiple different projects. One of the biggest things that I also worked on is that I spearheaded the internal communication plan for the upcoming Tahoe and Suburban, which is finally out, which is awesome. It's cool to see it finally in person, but really just kind of doing day-to-day tasks and really kind of navigating each day. Like everyone said, each day is really different. I spent a lot of time writing, conducting interviews, kind of doing things like that. I also had weekly scheduled meetings. Since I was remote, I met with my boss at least once a week, typically more than that. And then I had like editorial meetings, like certain meetings for projects. Like I spent a lot of time in meetings, and I think that especially when you're a remote worker or in person, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time in meetings. So similar to what everyone else said, no day was the same. And I think for me, that was kind of awesome. So moving on to our next question, and this is once again a little wonky if you did not work in person, but describe your office environment in person or virtual. Did you feel like you fit in? And we will start with Rebecca.
So for UMass admissions, my office environment was either my dorm room, my room at home, or like actually meeting with my bosses in an office. So it really varied. And I definitely felt like I fit in there. UMass admissions hires, I want to say about 10 interns like a semester. They just always have 10 interns at a time. So it's really fun to get to know everybody who's also my age or around my age, and get to know them, like their personalities, what they're studying, what their goals are. It's really fun to be able to work with other college students. And then my other office environment was actually a television studio at WGBY, and that was always bustling and there was a lot to do. And there were a bunch of guests coming in and out, so it was a lot of craziness, but it was definitely very fun. And I definitely felt like I fit in there. They always have interns kind of rotating around each semester, but the people who work there have been there forever, and they really make you feel like you're part of the team, and it's really awesome.
Awesome. Miriam?
Yeah, it was definitely an intimidating experience at first going in because the whole building had about 400 employees, and you're walking in as one of 13 co-ops, I want to say. So there's really only 13 people who are around your age, but you definitely find your community, and I did think that I fit in there. I remember UMass alumni would reach out and be like, "Hi, I graduated in this year. Like, if you ever want to sit down and chat and have coffee, that's fine."
Awesome. Lizette?
My office environment is literally my desk at home, but we have it stationed in the living room right now because my sister and I share a room, and she obviously needs the room to do all her work. I'm just like really excited to go back on campus, hopefully sometime soon, to have like my own workspace.
Totally. And similar to Lizette, I worked virtual, so it was definitely strange to not have like an office setting. So I was supposed to work in the Renaissance Center. I don't know if anybody has ever been to Detroit or seen it, but it's kind of this massive, huge tower, like 3-column tower in Detroit. I would have worked in a very, very big building, and I know we use Skype a lot, so it would tell me in Workday like exactly like my office seat and where I should have been sitting when I was there. So it was always funny, like me and my coworkers would kind of poke fun at like where I should have been and what tower I would have been. But even though I was virtual, and I was very fortunate that I had an awesome relationship with my boss and my whole team. Like they were all super awesome. Like I would constantly have calls with them, and they would always like we did weekly like team chats and team meetings. And I remember the day I left, it was really sweet. They sent me like an kind of like greeting card, and they all like kind of like signed it. It was awesome. And they did like a going away party. And it's just awesome to know that even though I wasn't in person, and I didn't, but hopefully this will change, I didn't have the experience to meet any of them, I still felt super welcomed, and I still felt like I was a super valued member of the team. And I think that not only is that the kind of the culture at General Motors, but I also think that it kind of helped that everyone was in the same boat. Everyone I was working with, besides some of the manufacturing team that I kind of mingled with on and off, was working remote, and they still are, unfortunately, kind of like everybody else. So I think that at least for me, even though I didn't have a traditional office setting, I think that there shouldn't really be a fear of having to work remotely. It's definitely scary. I will say that. It's definitely not the same. I'm more of a social person. I wish I could have been in office, but I think that especially when you have an awesome team and yourself who's really putting in the effort to feel like you can mingle and be there, I honestly, and I've said this once, I'll say this again, I didn't really feel like I was missing out by not being in office. And I think you kind of make the most of the situation that you're given. And I'm honestly, it was a great experience. So moving on to the next question, and this is one I actually really like, and this is, how has your internship shaped your view of your career? And we will start with Lizette.
This internship has definitely given me more opportunities to kind of like list as experiences in my career field, and so for that I'm very grateful. And it's also like just the fact that I even went for an internship, I think is also like I don't know, like it makes me feel proud of myself, and it makes me feel more confident going into this career field.
Awesome. Miriam?
So this co-op definitely has truly shaped my career. From a 6-month co-op, it actually ended up becoming a year. So I'm still working there, and they also hired me full time to start in January. So it's literally like my career at this point.
That's awesome. Rebecca?
Yeah, so both my internships have definitely shaped my future career. And I know I'm interested in going into broadcast journalism, like radio, television, or podcasting. But with that comes, you have to have the skills to do social media and writing and all those other things. So definitely getting the hands-on production experience at WGBY, as well as writing blogs and editing videos and doing social media work with UMass Admissions kind of helped me develop a really thorough, broad skill set for my future career.
That's awesome. And then for me, very similar to what everyone else said, I think, especially with this role, this was the first time I ever, funnily enough, as a comm student, this was the first role that was actually like strictly communication. All my other roles have been more in the marketing sector, and I love marketing, but I really kind of wanted to branch out and see. My boss will probably laugh at this, but I didn't even know internal communications was really a thing. It's a very niche part of comm, really awesome part, but it's something that I never really knew was there. And I think what I really loved about this experience with General Motors is that they have such a large comm department. So you can work in the brand and like acquisition all the way to like, they have manufacturing comm, they have public policy communication, just literally anything that you can kind of think of. I want to say they have about 8 to 10 different comm departments just at General Motors. And I think that you'll really find that in very large companies. And I know for myself, even as a comm student, badly enough, like I think sometimes it's easy to have this closed-minded view of what you can do, especially with a field in comm. And I think this experience especially kind of opened my eyes to literally how much you could do. And I know for me personally, like now I'm interested in continuing in internal communication, but also like trying out different fields. And it would be awesome to do manufacturing communications as well, and like just really kind of test where everything can kind of take me. So our next question, in a very, very similar vein, is did your career plans change or stay the same after your internship experience? And we will start with Mariam.
I think they definitely changed. I walked into that role I didn't expect to love the team and the job itself as much as I did.
Lizette?
I think it changed in the sense that I'm even more interested in social media now and in writing blogs and stuff. Especially because the same time that I got the job, I'm also now taking a lot more journalism and public relations classes. So like I have all these things in my environment that are kind of influencing me to go in that direction, and I like it so far.
Awesome. Rebecca?
So right now I'm in this weird place where I'm still trying to decide what exactly I want to do when I graduate. So doing these internships didn't necessarily change what I had envisioned for myself when I graduate. But like I said before, they definitely gave me the skills and made me realize what I am interested in. And everything that I've done within my internships, I have loved. So that's a great thing because I know I can go into either communications, marketing, or journalism and production, and I'll definitely find something that I love to do.
Awesome. And very similar to what everyone else said, I think for myself especially, this kind of threw me in a loop. I really honestly thought that I really pictured myself really going into more of a marketing route. I loved marketing. I thought it was awesome. A lot of my experiences in marketing communication, as I said previously, this is my first strictly comm role. So I didn't think that I was going to love it as much as I did. And now that I'm graduating in the fall, so I find myself getting into entry-level recruitment currently and really gravitating more towards comm and like PR roles more than marketing. Still applying to marketing roles, but now that I kind of know how vast and awesome communication is and how much it really aligns with a lot of the things I love, it just almost fits really well. And I think one of the things that I've kind of loved so much about doing comm, for example, is that I'm a very analytical person, but I'm also a very big writing heavy person. And I think that marketing and comm roles, like while they are very similar, there's a lot of differences between them. And I think that in a perfect world, from the experiences that I have, I would kind of have a marketing communication role where I'm able to still do the strategic stuff, but still have the opportunity to do all the writing and storytelling that I love. And I know if I didn't work at General Motors this summer and I didn't have that experience and I continued doing marketing, for example, I might still be doing the same thing I was doing before. But I will say that my career path stayed the same in a certain aspect, as if I could be picky, I would love to continue working in tech. That's where some of my experience has been. General Motors always makes me laugh. They consider themselves a tech company now as they kind of move into the EV market, which is awesome. And that was something that I really loved about working for them. So to be able to continue working in tech and very engineering heavy field is something that I love. And this experience really kind of reinforced that for me. So moving on to our next question, and this is, do you feel like you've learned a lot about the field you interned in? So we'll start with Lizette.
I feel like I've learned a lot so far, but I feel like I'm also still learning every day. When it comes to this stuff, I know that like I'm learning, like the first few weeks I learned a lot of technicalities, like how if you write University of Massachusetts Amherst instead of UMass Amherst, it like will search up, it will go up higher in the SEO. So that's like the little things like that, and also like how to caption pictures and stuff like that that you add to your blog posts. So those are things that I didn't know before that I have learned throughout, but I'm definitely excited to learn more.
Awesome. Rebecca?
So for my WGBY internship, I definitely learned that you have to have maybe not necessarily a thick skin, but you have to be ready to accept anything, because you don't know if a guest is going to walk out last minute or things like that. So I definitely learned that I'm a good multitasker and that I like challenging myself. So, and in the TV production world, and just news world in general, you have to kind of be willing to do those things. And exactly what like Lizette said for UMass admissions, I didn't know all of this stuff that you have to do for social media and video editing. And I've definitely learned a lot, just like Lizette said.
Awesome. Miriam?
I think I've definitely learned a lot more about working in tech, similar to how you were saying you didn't know there was a whole like communication department. I didn't know there was such thing as a customer success department. I always thought it was just like support where you would pick up the phone and you'd call them, but there are people helping people onboard and implement, and the ongoing support that clients get within a tech company is something I had no idea existed. You don't really hear about it too much. And the longer that I'm with the company, the more that I get to chat to people and learn about the different roles. And as far as the market space that the company is in, it's crazy to think like how niche a company can be and how broad it applies to people. So definitely learning more about both like the commerce space, because Salsify is an e-commerce product information management company. So definitely I've been learning way like so much more than I thought I would.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think for myself, not only was I in a role that like a strictly comms role, which I've never done before, but it was also kind of, I've never worked in the automotive industry. I will definitely admit that I'm not a big car person. And it's really funny. A lot of the people that I worked with were like diehard General Motors fans. Like they know every single Corvette that's ever been made, and they know every single Chevy. Like one of the guys I interned with, who was really awesome, but he went to Virginia Tech, and they have like an eco car like group, and he knew everything about cars, and he was so excited to be here. And I remember sitting here, I'm like, oh my god, I know absolutely nothing about all these cars, and I have to talk about them and do all this stuff. But it was such an awesome experience. I never thought I'd really be interested in cars. My dad was a really big car guy growing up, but I always saw it as his passion. It was something that I always connected with him, but I kind of had my little car and I enjoy it. And it was just really awesome to really learn about the field. I found myself really, really loving it. And I know when I worked for General Motors, they ended up revealing their new branding for Cadillac. So they revealed their Lyriq, which is their first all-electric vehicle. And I know they're really trying to push Cadillac in the whole EV centric. So it was awesome to really like see that come into fruition. I worked really closely with some of the Cadillac teams. It was awesome to really see the vehicle out loud and really see everything in person. Same thing, the Hummer EV was released yesterday, kind of revealed. It was awesome. And to really see a lot of these cars in fruition. And I think why I really kind of liked working in the automotive is because it was more tech centric than I thought it was. And I think that was so surprising for me. And I just found so much that I really loved in it, and it was just really, really awesome. And now I know a lot more about cars than I thought I never would. And then similar with comms, like since it was the first time really working there, it was awesome to really see how much you can kind of do with it. I never really realized how vast internal comms was. And I think what was really particularly awesome for me is that internal communication is literally like a hodgepodge of everything. Like, yes, I was telling internal storytelling, but I was doing it across literally every single brand, like I was able to meet with and speak with the CEO of General Motors, which was in itself crazy. And just being able to touch every aspect of the company was something that was super awesome. And not everyone was able to do. And I think that was something about the role that was just awesome. And it taught me a lot, and it was just really great. So now moving on to our next question in this category, kind of similar to what we just talked about, but what skills did you learn during your internship? And we will start with Mariam.
I think the biggest skill that I had to adapt to was, I want to say it's not really time management, but more so like the shifting that your brain has to go through from one project to another. I feel like in school, you know what your classes are at the beginning, and you can kind of learn like, okay, at this point, I'm going to be thinking about math or calc. And then at another point, it's like bio or whatever, like whatever your classes is, you can kind of predict what your mind shift is going to be. Whereas when I was in the workplace, like every single day is different. Every single hour you're going into a meeting for a different product, or communicating something else to clients, newsletter meetings, whatever it is, you just have to learn to shift your brain so quickly, because you can't take 30 minutes to change your mindset. You have to do it in like 5 or less usually.
Awesome. Rebecca?
Similar to what Miriam was saying, I think the number one skill that I learned during both of my internships was the ability to multitask. I learned that I have to be ready to take on projects even when I'm not ready for them necessarily, and also just learn how to manage my time as best as I can.
Lizette?
So aside from all the technical skills that I had to learn about blog posting and stuff, I think also I've learned to kind of keep an eye out for stories. So basically, what UMass Admissions does is it's like branding for UMass to keep to interest students who are incoming freshmen, and so like. For example, for one of my journalism classes, I had to go interview, like I had to do a news reporting kind of homework assignment, right? And so I interviewed 2 people from the academic fellows program. It was just for that homework assignment, but I thought that this would be kind of a cool story also for the blog. So I would always like keep an eye out for those kinds of story opportunities. And yeah.
Awesome. And very similar to what everyone else said, I think honestly, I don't know if this is necessarily a skill, but I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is really how to be adaptable. Not only was this the first time I worked in the automotive industry, this is my first comm role. This is the first time I ever worked remote. Like I also work for UMass Admissions, funnily enough, and that role has always been remote, but I think that there's a really large difference from doing like a part-time job kind of remote and then doing a full-on corporate 9-to-5 internship remote in a completely different place. And I think I really had to push myself to not only continue doing the same things I would do at a traditional internship, like networking, really making sure I was doing good work and that I was being kind of valued for the things that I was doing. But it's just, I really learned how important it is to be adaptable, and especially in this market with everything going on, being able to show your diverse range of skill sets is only going to help you. So whether I stay at General Motors or I kind of go somewhere else, I know that this experience is something that I'm going to be talking about for a very long time. I've been talking about it in all of my interviews, and it's something that I'm always going to kind of look on very fondly. And I think especially if you're looking for an internship or full-time job, if you can find something that kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone, where you know, especially for an internship where you're like, okay, I'm only going to be here for 3 months, or maybe like Miriam, it might be longer. It could turn into a full-time role. But what's awesome about internships, there's no 100% long-term commitment. It's only for an X amount of time. Typically, it could turn into something else, but it's an amazing time for you to explore and push yourself out of your comfort zone. So I would really honestly recommend, especially looking for internships that push you out of your comfort zone, that will teach you really adaptable and transferable skills that will set you up for success no matter kind of what market you kind of go in. So moving on to our next category, which is social networking. So this again might be a little wonky if you worked remotely, but it's still, I think it's really important, especially in our virtual environment. So our first question is, were you able to connect with other interns? If so, was it through your internship, or did you go out and connect with other interns? So like kind of what kind of, was it part of the curriculum for you to talk to other interns, or did you kind of go out and work with them and seek to work with them? So we will start with Rebecca.
For both of my internships, I worked really closely with other interns. So like I said before, at UMass Admissions, there's about 10 or so other interns, and I don't frequently work with them, but sometimes, like when we were in person on campus, we would have meetings together and we would do trainings together and get to know one another. But the work was pretty much individual. And then at WGBY, I was hired at the same time as another intern, and she and I worked together one day, and then another day she couldn't make it, so I would be alone, but she and I would record shows together. She would be on one camera, I would be on the other, and we would work in the control room together, and it was really nice to kind of meet somebody who had similar career interests as me.
Awesome. Lizette?
So since I'm doing UMass admissions right now, but everything's remote and I'm at home, I haven't had a chance to get to work with people as closely, but because now I'm in the social media committee for UMass admissions, they're also like partnering us with not only some of the other interns, but they're also partnering us with the UMass tour guides to kind of do like Instagram takeovers and stuff like that. We haven't started any projects yet, but that's coming up.
Awesome. Miriam?
So we didn't have any scheduled time to really meet or work with each other at all. We're all in different departments. And we started on the same day. So we all got to see each other and get to know each other in like our hiring orientation. But apart from that, it was really up to us to reach out and make friends with them.
So for myself, what was obviously I navigated a kind of remote internship. So what was cool is that this is the first time I kind of worked in a department where there was other like interns. I worked at a software engineering company the previous summer, and I was the only like business non-engineering person, which is awesome. I made a lot of really awesome friends, but this is the first time I actually had other comm students to work with. So there was 4 of us. We each represented a different department. I worked in internal, someone worked in tech, the other worked in, oh my God, manufacturing, and then the other did brand. So we represented some of the key areas that GM did comms, and it was awesome. We had a group project together, which was awesome. And it was nice to like have a clear cut, like this is something that we're going to do together. It was a presentation, and even though we were remote, one of the best things is that we actually became really good friends, and it was awesome. I know the minute we all started working, a little manic, but I like emailed them right away and I'm like, let's have Friday lunches every Friday. Let's get together and go on like Skype and just eat and kind of vent about everything. And I think that especially in an internship, it's nice to have people you can relate to. And like, I loved my team. I thought they were so awesome, but it's still nice to sit down and talk to another intern who can really understand, like, we're interns. How are you feeling about this job? Do you want to keep working here? Like, how do you feel about coming back full time? And just being able to really talk and like get to know each other. And for me, it was awesome. And it was really important for me to, even though I was remote, one of the biggest things I loved about my previous internships was making friends and just getting to know so many people. And that was one of the things I was really looking forward to about moving to Detroit, was actually like living with an apartment full of people, having a good time. But fortunately, the pandemic kind of got in the way of things. But I made sure that really didn't stop me. And one of the cool things about General Motors, similar to really big companies, they had like 500 interns during the summer. So there's a lot of people. And one thing that I did, we had one of our internal platforms called Yammer. It's very similar to Facebook. We had like a page for just interns. So I would reach out frequently and I'm like, anybody want to go on Skype and have lunch? And it was awesome because I was actually able to meet with quite a few different interns across the company and really understand, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you working on? It was honestly really awesome. And I think that one thing I learned is, even if you're remote or don't have the opportunity to meet as many people as you want, don't let that stop you. And I think that it helped to make my internship even better by making friends and meeting people and having like a support network. I also wrote a lot of stories about the internship experience, since it was kind of a unique time. So that was also a really great way for me to kind of network with other interns. And for me, it was awesome to also reach out and kind of see the different departments, and then for them to learn about what I do. And I think when you were in a company that large, it's easy to kind of stick in your department and not really talk to anybody. But I know for me, especially as an intern, you want to soak up as much as you can. And if you can take the time to not only network with full-time employees, but 100% interns, absolutely network with interns, because they could be your friends and they could easily be your coworkers one day. And I just can't recommend it enough. So moving on, very similar question, but moving on to our next question is, were you able to network both within your internship site and outside of it? So like, were you able to not only kind of network with your team, but were you able to kind of reach out a little bit and meet other people across the company as well? So we will start with Miriam.
At Salsify, definitely. All you need to do is really Slack somebody, or in person, you can just go up to their wherever they sit, and you can ask, like, do you want to go grab lunch? Do you want to get coffee? You can put time on their calendars, and everyone's super, super open to just chatting about whether you want to chat about work or you want to chat about other things. Like, everyone's totally open to it.
Awesome. Rebecca?
Yeah, so funny story about WGBY. I actually kind of got the job that I got because I had previously networked with the producer there.
Oh, awesome.
I used to attend Westfield State University, and they have a television studio on campus, and they do a show called As Schools Match Wits, and I volunteered doing that for about a semester, and then I ended up transferring to UMass, and then I found out about this job opportunity at WGBY, and I found out he was the one who was interviewing me. So I didn't necessarily network within the company once I was there. I met some of the previous interns who they actually would call up if we had a big production and we needed more hands to help. So I did meet some people that way, but it just goes to show that networking is really important, and it can lead to an awesome internship opportunity.
Awesome. Lizette?
So the way I've been networking kind of is, so sometimes for blog posts, I have to go and interview people over Zoom, and I actually end up getting to learn a lot about them. And this one girl I had to interview for a recent article that I did, she ended up, we ended up becoming friends on Instagram,
Awesome.
and then afterwards friends on LinkedIn, and she's got a lot of experience on her hands, so it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And very similar to what I said before, like, I think that in any internship, especially, like, I can't stress enough how important it is to kind of network. And like I said, hopefully, and I unfortunately think that a lot of people, even for this upcoming summer's recruitment for 2021, I have a feeling a lot of people are still going to be remote. So I wouldn't doubt that a lot of internships are either going to be hybrid or fully remote again if the course of everything continues. So I cannot stress enough to, even if you have to be remote and it's not what you were looking forward to, there's still ways to go around it. And I think similar to what like Miriam said, that there's tools for it. So at General Motors, we used Skype. We had our multiple internal platforms, and we also had Microsoft Teams and Outlook. So there's literally a million ways that you can, if there's a will, there's a way. You can find a way to talk to people. And I think that while it can be intimidating, I think something that I found, especially when you're an intern at for most companies, hopefully all, that everyone wants to talk to you. And it's easy to look at like senior leaders and be like, they don't want to talk to me. Why would they want to talk to me? But you'd be surprised that like how many people are actually so open and willing to make time to talk to someone. At least that was my experience, and I hope that is everyone's experience. And I think that being an intern, they want to get to know you. You're a prospective hire in that company. They want to make a good impression on you. And I think a lot of the times people forget that not only is this kind of a kind of reflection in a process, not only for the company to evaluate you, but for you to evaluate the company. You're kind of going to be out there and talking about them and reflecting on your experience, and they want it to be as positive for you as kind of it is for them. So utilize your network while you have it. And I know I still talk to my old employees from GM. I literally talked to my boss the other day, and you kind of keep those friendships and you keep that network. And even when you leave the company or come back eventually, it's nice to know that you still have those friendships in line. So moving on to our next question, very similar to kind of the networking, but going a little bit more in depth. So if you were able to network at your internship, how you were able, kind of talk a little bit of kind of how you were able to network, kind of tips on networking, and potentially like maybe talk about some of the people that you met while you were networking. And we will start with Rebecca.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, at WGBY, they would kind of bring in some previous interns, and a lot of them, they had been interns like 20 or 30 years ago. It's a really old internship program, but it was awesome to kind of see like where these people were at with their lives and what they were doing. A lot of them were freelance, like video production people. They did that for other companies and stuff as well. And basically all I did was just go up to them in between tapings and just introduce myself and tell them what I'm studying in school. A lot of them want to know that. And they would kind of ask me questions as well, and we would just have conversations. And that's kind of how I networked at WGBY.
Awesome. Miriam?
So for me, it was a mixture of people reaching out to me. So like I said, like the old UMass alumni, like they would reach out and be like, if you want to grab coffee, like just tell me, and I'd be happy to make some time. So there were a couple that were like that, and others were me purely just bumping into people in like the office kitchen. We'll all be there at breakfast making coffees and oatmeal and stuff, and we'll just like talk about our mornings, talk about the day, or like the green line was so slow today. Just like making these comments that like everyone can relate to is a really good way of kind of randomly meeting people. And the other way was kind of getting recommendations from my team. So we had members who were on the team previously, but they had moved to different departments, and they would say like, oh, this person loves theater too. Like you should totally sit down, talk to her. Like we love performing. Like you guys can probably get along about that. And so then it's just reaching out there.
Awesome. Lizette?
So as I mentioned, I don't have like a very traditional networking experience, but I do meet people through doing interviews for blog posts. And one thing that's helped, this kind of relates to what Rebecca and Miriam were saying, but basically we'd have conversations off the record. Like this part wouldn't end up in the interview, but we talk about like how our week's been going, the classes that we're taking, and like Miriam said, like things that everyone can relate to, and that's how I've been able to form those connections.
Awesome. And kind of similar to what everyone else is talking about, I think that even like with my experience having to kind of network remote, like I said, if there's a will, there's kind of a way. And I found myself a lot of the times, my boss was phenomenal, and I was her third intern at this point. And something that she did with not only myself and the other interns is that we actually had networking sessions with the different departments in communication. So we'd meet the whole team. We would be on Skype, kind of have enough time in like the hour, because there were pretty big teams, to kind of like introduce each other. And then from there, what was really awesome is that I'd kind of take notes on everyone, pinpoint, I'm like, I want to talk to that person, and set up like individual Skype meetings with them. And like I said, like I would send an email, I would talk about, be like, hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z of your role. Here's a little introduction about me. Like, this is my manager. This is what I'm working on. And literally every single person that I emailed and cold emailed, they always said yes. And what was really awesome for me is that what I found really helpful, especially when you're doing like a Skype interview essentially with somebody, is that I would always kind of look up their background information. So kind of look at their profile on like Skype and Workday, but also like see if I can find them on LinkedIn, see how long they've kind of worked in their role. What was cool about General Motors is that a lot of people had been in the company for a long time, but were in a bunch of different roles. And I would kind of pinpoint, like, I heard you did this role for a while. Can you talk to me about that? Or like, can we talk about X, Y, and Z? Or just honestly, a lot of the times I found myself asking, like, I want to be in your shoes. Like, how can you kind of help me out? Or what's like good advice that you can kind of tell me? Kind of navigating. And what was awesome, my boss too, like she literally, the day I walked into the job, she had like a list of people. She's like, you have to talk to these people. Like you absolutely need to talk to these people. So I definitely give her a lot of credit for kind of pushing me towards that path and really making sure. She was so funny. Like every time we did our weekly meeting, she'd always be talking to me. She'd be like, Aaliyah, did you talk to X, Y, and Z yet? Why haven't you talked to them? Like, make sure you go talk to them. So I'd always have a really packed schedule on top of like getting my work done. But she really, really saw the value in making sure that I talked to as many people as I could. And I'm really grateful that I took advantage of that, because I met so many amazing people. And I think with General Motors, which was so awesome, and I highly encourage everyone to kind of do this, is don't be afraid to reach out to senior leaders. It was awesome to make relationships with people really high up in the department. I know one of the most cherished experience that I had from General Motors was I was able to interview and meet with the CEO, Mary Barra. That was kind of crazy. I did not think I was going to be able to do something like that, but it's things like that. It's like, always reach high, because you just never know. Worst thing that's going to happen, they're not going to respond to you, or someone else will respond for them. And I think especially with senior leaders, what was cool about Mary is that she was a former co-op. That was her first role at General Motors. She went all the way from the co-op and eventually became the CEO of the company. So she was very big on intern centric. Like she knew what was it like. She's been in that company for a very long time. So to be able to kind of sit down and talk to her was awesome. And I am very fortunate that I was able to do that. Not every intern was kind of able to have that experience. But like I said, just shoot high and you can't really fail. And all these people, pretty much everyone you meet with who's going to want to talk to you. So really, really take advantage of that. So moving on to our last category, which is reflection and moving forward. So our first question is, how did your internship tie into your major, + what you've learned in your classes? And we will start with Lizette.
So my internship, there's a lot of focus on storytelling, and that's essentially what journalism is about. And like now that there's going to be a social media aspect to it too, there's that kind of relates to the whole public relations aspect, and also kind of like I said, UMass admissions is like branding UMass to incoming students. So like that also has to do with public relations in that sense.
Awesome. Miriam?
I think my internship has tied really well to the classes that I've taken at UMass. I'm minoring in IT, so the technical skills that I got from my minor were incredibly helpful and got me to kind of distinguish myself as a co-op, because the previous co-ops, like everyone, like as a baseline requirement, like you have to know how to write or video edit, but to bring in someone who like knows how to code. So I think like all these classes that I've taken on top of my major were truly like the distinguishing factor.
Awesome. Rebecca?
My internship's definitely tied into what I'm majoring in and what I learned in my classes. Like I said, I'm a journalism and communication double major. My production internship tied in a lot with journalism, and then my communication and marketing internship obviously tied a lot in with my communication major. I took a broadcast performance class under the journalism major, and we actually got to use the studio cameras and produce our own newscasts, which I had already kind of been doing at WGBY. So that definitely tied in that way. And then just everything that I've been learning in my communication classes, my communication and marketing internship has definitely employed. So everything just kind of ties in seamlessly.
Awesome. And very similar to what everyone else says. So I'm an English and comm double major. So I think especially with this role on internal comm, I definitely really utilize my writing skills. I think I wrote and published about 25, 26 different stories on top of some of the other stuff that I was working on. So really having that concrete understanding of how do I write stories, like how am I trying to frame this, and also really understanding like what is the tone of GM and what is the tone. Each brand is very, very different. So like, how do I tell the stories from the different brands? And also how do I tell the stories that employees want to hear, especially in the market with everything going on with the pandemic? You're essentially only have probably 5 minutes or so of someone's time a day. So how do I get them to click on my articles, and how do I get them to kind of engage with the content I'm producing? And I think especially with comm as well, is that you really get the strategic side, and you're really trying to understand like kind of what makes people tick. How do I understand like how to be an effective communicator? And I think both of my majors in all the intern roles that I've been at have been awesome, and I think they've really helped me out into what I'm doing. And I think that sometimes it's easy to sit in class and be like, how the heck can I put this towards a job, or like how is this going to apply to what I'm doing? But I think you'd be surprised sometimes on how applicable what you learn in school and kind of what you're doing in the major really applies to the roles that you're going to pursue. So moving on to our next question, it's what are some challenges that you faced while interning? And we will start with Miriam.
I think the biggest challenge I faced, and kind of still do even after like 10 months of working there, is this idea of ownership of your work. So when you're in school, like we'll do all this homework, we'll write stuff, we'll produce stuff, but there's always someone kind of having that final check. Whereas even in the workforce, like there'll be reviewers, but occasionally you're just expected to go live to the public with no one checking your work. And I think that is a very new feeling, and in some instances can be a very scary feeling as well.
Awesome. Lizette?
So I've only been in this internship since September, or like, the end of August. And so I would say that probably the biggest challenge is being remote and, having to like, we were just talking about networking. And I actually just learned a lot from this panel about, like finding ways to network. So that's been challenging, but I'll find a way around it.
Awesome. Rebecca?
Definitely the biggest challenge that I faced was time management. The 2 internships that I talked about, I started them at the same time, and I also had a third internship. So juggling everything at once was a nightmare, but it was so worth it because like the memories like that I made there and the skills that I developed were definitely worth all the stress of managing my time there. Yeah.
Yeah, and Very, very similar to Lizette. Probably my biggest challenge, especially at first, was being remote. It's definitely, I remember I finally got the confirmation that I would be remote after UMass kind of sent us back. I know it was really, for us at least at General Motors, it was really up in the air of what the heck was going to go on. I remember I had the option initially to kind of you go into the apartments and kind of move there with the hope that I would eventually go into office. As much as I would have loved to do that, I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because they didn't end up going back into office, so I probably would have been sitting in the apartment all day. But I remember vividly the night before I started my job, like pacing around the room. I'm like, oh my God, I start work tomorrow. What am I going to do? Like, it just felt so unnatural to think that like I'm going to wake up and sit in my room and do a job. Like I was so used to going into office and doing stuff like that. But I will say, like, as nervous as I was, and understandably so, it's easy to be nervous, especially like even navigating a semester remote. If it's your first time, or like most of us is the first time, we're not really used to it. It's hard and it's intimidating. But I found that, at least for myself, like making sure that like I made it as quote unquote normal as possible. Like I'd get dressed every morning and I'd put on my lipstick, put on my boots, pretend like I was going in the office. And for me, it just gave me a bit of normalcy back in my day, and like felt like I was doing something. And I would even like get up and talk to my mom or my grandma every once in a while, just to feel like I was talking to somebody, and like that I got a little bit engagement in my day. But I will say, like, especially doing an internship remotely, it's scary. It's kind of nerve wracking at first, because you're like, am I going to do a good job? Is this going to affect my work? Am I going to be liked because I'm not there? But I will say that those nerves for me at least kind of really melted away within a couple of weeks of me working there. Honestly, even less, because I had an awesome team. And if anything, I look back on the experience and I'm glad that I kind of had to do it remote, because I think it taught me a lot. So moving on to our next question is more of a little bit of a fun one, but what was your biggest success in your internship? And we will start with Rebecca.
Definitely the memories that I made. I know it's not very like professional related, but I don't know, when I think about like all my internship experiences, I definitely think about the work that I did, and the awesome experience that I had, like gaining professional like skills and knowledge and everything like that. But when I really like think about the internships that I did, I think about the people that I met and the memories that I made. So just everything about like the great work environments that I was in.
Awesome. Lizette?
So I also think about the work that I did, and like I said, I've only been in this internship recently, but I did have one story that came out in September about one of the history classes here at UMass, and it was about Filipino history, which is my culture, and so like that in itself makes me really proud that I was able to give that representation to the surface, and it was just like that's so far my favorite story that I've written.
Awesome. Miriam?
I mean, I think personally, what I'm really proud of is just kind of getting that full-time hire. But definitely one success that I would pinpoint from a more professional setting is making like the customer's life easier. I ended up coding this kind of transformation builder, which, to simplify, is basically there are some aspects of the platform that require you to have some coding skills, and the people who are using the platform are usually in marketing, not people who typically code. So this platform that I made, it allowed people to just choose settings and output something that would help them, and that would take maybe like an hour or two off their plate.
Awesome. And very similar to kind of what everyone else said, I think, at least for me, two of the biggest kind of successes in my internship is definitely my first one was what we did at General Motors, and I'm assuming it's probably going to be very similar for most people, whether it be a full-time job or an internship, is that we had like a midterm review and then we had an end review. And I remember having my midterm review with my boss, and just obviously you go in, you're like a little bit nervous. You're like, okay, this is my first kind of big review. I've been working remotely, like let's see how this goes. And I think it was just so awesome to really hear my boss literally have nothing negative to say. And I think that especially when you're working remotely, you have, even in office, like you have so much pressure as an intern or even a new hire, where you're like, I really don't want to screw up. I really want to make a good impression. And I think for me, it was just so awesome to kind of hear how much my boss enjoyed me and how much she really loved the work I was doing. And like I said, I still have a very good relationship with her. I still talk to her, which is really awesome. And I think it's crazy how much even a little bit of positive energy can really go a long way. I remember when I left that meeting, I was just like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I can't wait to keep going. And even my final review and kind of closing interview was super positive, and really to hear like that your work was valued and that people enjoyed working with you. It's like I said, the little things go a long way, and this is something that I hope everyone kind of gets out of their internship. Obviously you want it to be as positive and awesome for yourself, and you really want to feel like you did a good job and that you had a good time. And then lastly, probably more of my professional biggest thing that I really enjoyed, kind of like what I said before, I had the opportunity to interview and kind of host a panel with the CEO, Mary Barra. So I was kind of picked kind of out of the blue because I worked with the executive comms team as well. So they were looking, I jumped in on the meeting. My boss was like, you want to join this meeting? I was like, okay, might as well. Like, let's see what this is about. And they were looking for someone to moderate the panel with the interns. And my boss is like, Leah can do it. And this is, mind you, this is like my third week working there. And she's like, yeah, Leah can do it. And of course, who's going to say no to kind of an opportunity like that? And at least for me, what was so awesome about that opportunity was, I mean, I've never really hosted anything remotely, hence kind of why I'm doing this now today. It's something that I actually found that I really like. It's awesome to kind of do panels and stuff like that, but it was really out of my comfort zone. And my other companies, I never had the opportunity to talk to someone as high as a CEO. And I remember when the event was finally over, it was kind of weird because it's just her and I on Skype, and it was broadcasted to all the other interns, just to not only have my boss call me right away and tell me I did an awesome job, but have like random interns and people I never met before kind of reach out and be like, that was super cool. Like, how'd you get that gig? And it was just really awesome to kind of have that, once again, like kind of have that affirmation that you did well. And definitely one of the highlights of that experience, Mary ended up commenting on like one of my LinkedIn posts, which I was like, who paid her to do that? First of all, like it was just really, really funny. And it was just awesome. And like I said, it's great how like small things like that, or even big things, can kind of go a long way, and not only like really making the opportunity for you, but just really leaving a positive impact. I think that a lot of the times, like when you go into an internship or job, like you want to leave with positive, and you want to feel like you did a really good job, and you want to feel happy. So that's what I hope everyone gets out of their jobs. So moving on to our next question. And this one is, what's something you wish you knew prior to your internship? And we will start with Lizette.
Prior to my internship, I mean, like, I guess I wish I would have known how to, like, network while you're being remote, but, like, I'm learning that right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's something that I'm going to apply after this.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Miriam?
Definitely don't try to work and go to school full time simultaneously. I just finished a 9 to 5 right before this.
Yeah.
I like literally feel like a zombie. But definitely, like, if I go back and be like, just calm down, slow down, like take the semester off if you need to.
Absolutely. Rebecca?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with what Miriam was saying. I totally feel the same way. But definitely something that I wish I knew is that it's always going to be, or it's not always going to be stressful, but there's going to be times where you just feel really stressed out with all the work that you have going on, especially if you're doing an internship at the same time as school. But that stress is going to be worth it if you are doing something that you love.
Yeah, and I know for myself, I guess like the biggest thing that I kind of wish I knew before going into it is that I guess, oh, this is actually a really hard question, but I think that one of the things that I wish I kind of knew is, I guess, somewhat of proper, like, I don't want to say like etiquette when you're on like calls, but I guess I wish I pushed myself to kind of, I wish I told myself it's okay to kind of speak up a little bit more. And I think that's when you're in like really, really big meetings, for example, it's really easy to kind of like sit there and be like, I'm going to listen to what everyone else has to say. Like, I'm not going to say anything. And I think that I wish I gave myself a little bit more of a pep talk before I got in and said, come on, Leah, like you can talk in these big meetings. Like, you're here for a reason. They kind of want to hear your value. And I found it's really easy when you're talking in like small things, because it's kind of easier to talk and not have to worry about like, am I talking over somebody else? But I would definitely say that I wish that like I told myself from the bat, like, don't be afraid to take this as normal as you would have if you were in person. Like, I know that if I was in person, I probably would have had no problem talking in big meetings, but it's like kind of navigating that weird etiquette on like Skype. And I'm sure we all are used to it on Zoom when you're in class and you're kind of talking over somebody by accident, but it's just kind of giving myself a little bit more affirmation in that aspect. So moving on to one of our final questions. And this question is, what is some advice / recommendations you would give to those planning on interning? And we will start with Rebecca.
Yeah, so the advice that I have actually has to do with preparing for applying for internships and like trying to get those internships. Be prepared to be rejected. Unfortunately, with however many applications you send out, there's definitely going to be some rejections. Don't take that as a personal thing against you. Sometimes there's just somebody who has a better fit for that position. But with every rejection that you get, you're one step closer to finding an internship that's meant for you.
Awesome. Lizette?
So this is kind of like on the opposite end of what Rebecca was saying. So while you should be prepared for rejection, like it's always good to be realistic. I also think that even if you don't feel as qualified to go for an internship, you should still go for it. Like I said earlier, when I first started the job posting for UMass admissions, it said something about like video editing, and I've never done that professionally, but I do have like a bit of experience with like writing and social media. So I fit those qualities, but I didn't have the video editing qualities. And so far I haven't had to edit a video, but I'm looking to do that in the future. But if it wasn't for Aaliyah encouraging me to still go for it, even though I didn't feel as qualified, I wouldn't have this internship right now.
So Miriam?
My advice would be open to even the companies that you have no idea what they do. Like I said, Soulspice in Boston. So for my in-person interview, I had to drive 2 hours and I had no idea what they did. When I read their description, I wasn't really interested in what they did either. And I almost didn't go. I was like, it was maybe a week before I was thinking about it. I'm like, it's not too late to kind of not do this because I had other companies in mind. But in the end, it was kind of a split decision. I was like, you're going to do it. You're going to go. And it turned out to be such a good fit, and I'm so glad that I went.
Awesome. And really echoing what everyone else says, especially kind of going off what Lizette said. And I think this is something that as a peer advisor that I always tell my advisees, like, even if you think you remotely fit the description, apply. Like, so many times I've applied to jobs that I'm probably very underqualified for realistically, or some that I'm overqualified for. And I think that, in my opinion, I think that a lot of jobs, similar with college admissions, is a little bit of a crapshoot. You really don't know if you're going to get the position or not. All it takes is someone on the hiring team or someone in HR or even the screening process to kind of see some value in your resume to push you forward. And you just really never know. I've had jobs where like I applied and I'm like, oh, I got this in the bag. There's no way I'm not getting an interview. And I don't get the interview. And some that I'm like, oh, this is not going to work out. And it worked out. And I think that you just really never know. And it's like, there's no charge in applying. No one's going to judge you if you apply to so many jobs. I remember last summer, I probably applied to like hundreds, if not more, internships. And you're just going to apply to a bunch of them. And I can't recommend not like, keep going. Even if you have interviews, keep applying. Like, it's always best because you just never know how something's going to work out. And in a similar vein, I remember when I had my final interview with GM, like, I thought I bombed it. I called my boyfriend. I was like, yeah, I'm not getting that job. This is not going to work out. And I ended up getting the role. And I think that never really assume that it's going to go one way or another because you never know. And I remember when I got the call saying that I got the job, I literally told the person on the phone, it was someone on one of the other teams, I was like, I thought I failed. And she's like, no, everyone loved you. And it's like, you just really never know. And I think especially we are our own worst critics a lot of the time. And it's so easy to be, similar to what Rebecca said, so easy to beat yourself up when you don't get something. And especially now as like, I'm personally navigating like full-time recruitment, like, unfortunately this job market sucks. It's not very good right now. And everything is just really wonky. And it's just like, you really have to learn, unfortunately, to kind of separate your own worth and values from the application process. And it's very easy sometimes to be like, go through the whole process and not get the role, or someone else gets it and kind of feel bad. And that's normal. You're going to feel bad if things don't work out. But I just kind of pick yourself back up. And like Rebecca said, there's always the better fit is out there for you, and you just have to wait for it sometimes. And I guess my last piece of advice, especially being a remote intern, is don't fear being remote. And I know that kind of Lizette and I, obviously there's challenges kind of being remote. And I think that this semester has really taught us that there's challenges being remote. It's not very fun. But I think that one of the things that was so awesome that I noticed is that so many more companies are like opening up fall or spring internships remotely to everyone. Now you can do internships with crazy companies or in crazy locations that you would have had to move to be there for. And I think that if you can take advantage of that now while you can, and this is something that I talked to, when I was working at General Motors, I talked to them about, I'm like, not everyone can afford to move or has the opportunity to move for a job. So if you can keep allowing certain people to work remotely for the time being, especially for internships and stuff, why wouldn't you, if they can still be a good employee? And I think that this summer, and probably next summer especially, are kind of going to show that you can still do really awesome work remotely and you can still be an awesome employee. So I know this semester is kind of wonky for a lot of people, but don't get discouraged by working remotely. I will definitely say that working a job remotely and doing school remotely, or at least for me, feels really different. I actually enjoyed being a remote worker. I found kind of fun in it, but I just say go for it. So that was kind of the end of my questions. I'm very sorry, Alexa, I do not want to put you on the spot, but I'm just going to see if you have any questions for us. And if not, we will just move to a little bit of closing remarks from everybody. So I'll give you a few seconds to see if you have anything. And you can use the chat if you would like to as well. Awesome. So, well, now that this kind of concludes the end of our panel, I appreciate everyone who's also here in person and kind of jumped in for a while, and also everyone who is hopefully watching this recorded on YouTube eventually. But like I said, I'm just going to give everyone, kind of our panelists, the opportunity for kind of any last words or anything else that they want to echo before we leave. You can plug yourself, you can plug your LinkedIn, you can kind of plug anything, or you can just talk about a little bit more about stuff. So I will pass it off to Marianne first for last words.
Yeah, I think my last words would just be like, go for it, apply for anything and everything you can, echoing what you've said. If you fit even a little bit, like, go for it and be open to companies who have no idea what they do. Even if it's not like HubSpot or Facebook, they don't have that name recognition, but they can be an amazing fit for you too.
Awesome. Lizette?
So I guess my closing remarks would be that I am very thankful to be here. I learned a lot from this panel, especially because I feel like I'm definitely on the more like my internship is more of a part-time job kind of internship, and I'm still working on it. Like, it just started. So I learned a lot from Miriam and Rebecca and Aaliyah, from like all of your guys' experiences. And I wanted to thank Alexa for staying until the end.
Thanks, Alexa. And lastly, Rebecca.
Yeah, so I just want to say a quick thank you to Aaliyah and everybody from the communication department who helped put this together. This was really fun. And basically just mirroring what Miriam said, just go for it. Like, you're more qualified for an internship than you think you are. And the only way to know if you get it is if you apply. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You're only a college student for so long. And I don't know, just yeah, you got it.
Yeah, and very, like I said, once again, very similar to what everyone else said, like, I cannot encourage everyone enough to just literally go for it. Like I said, thankfully, it doesn't cost any money to apply to jobs, and you can literally apply to as million of them as you want to. And I've applied to some companies multiple times, and God knows how many roles in certain companies. And I think that never be discouraged by the amount of places you have to apply to get that job, because at the end of the day, like, it's going to be worth it. And I also want to really echo something that Marianne just said too. Like, it's very easy, and also obviously it's a little bit difficult coming from me, but it's like, it's very easy to get deterred. Like, I have to work for this super high up corporate company, or I have to do X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, that's not a perfect fit for everyone. Like, I personally lucked out that I really liked working at General Motors, but it's probably not the fit for everyone. And Facebook, Microsoft, Google, all these places, like, you might think that you really want to work there, but it might not be a good fit for you. And I think that it's so important to really kind of take the bias mindset out and feel like, I have to work at these crazy corporate companies because then I'm not worth it if I'm not in those places, and I'm not going to end up where I want. And I think even my own experience kind of working all over the place, like, the name of the company really doesn't matter. It really matters your experience and what you get out of it. And who cares if you're working at a startup or somewhere else, or a company that some people might not know off the back of their hand. Like, all that matters is that you love your job, you're having a good time. And I would dare to say that there's probably people working at big corporate companies that hate it and are only doing it because it helps them out in the long run. So I guess that's my little piece of advice. Like I said, I just want to thank not only the panelists for coming. I had a really awesome time. I love talking about internships, so I'm really happy that we were able to do this. I'm happy that we were able to record it so we can kind of spread it around and let other people who were unable to attend. And I will definitely say that it's hard to get on Zoom calls. And once again, Alexa, I'm going to thank you for staying on this whole time, because I know that even for me, it's hard to kind of stay on a call this long. But once again, thank you guys so much. And hopefully this helps everyone with their internships experiences.